Coming up on New Day at Arirang, South Korea is set to report fewer than 300,000 COVID-19 cases on Friday. This is about 41,000 cases less than a day ago. Meanwhile, new distancing rules are set to be announced in the coming hours. The White House has announced the largest release of U.S. emergency oil reserves, calling on oil companies to pump more to bring down gas prices that have skyrocketed following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And senior military leaders from South Korea and the U.S. have signed the strategic planning directive, moving one step closer to updating their war plan to counter new threats.
Hello and welcome to this Friday edition of New Day at Arirang. I'm Mark Broom. Thanks for joining us today.
And I'm Kim Mo-gyan. It's 8 a.m. in Seoul, Korea, April 1st. And over the next hour, we'll take a look at the big news stories of the day and get expert insights on issues facing Korea and the world.
We certainly will. We are going to start with the COVID-19 situation in South Korea. The country is expected to see yet another drop in daily cases, with fewer infections confirmed through 9 p.m. Korea time on Thursday.
And South Korea is set to announce revised social distancing measures in the coming hours. For more, our reporter Choi Min-jung is here in the studio with us. Good morning, Min-jung.
Good morning.
So, Min-jung, let's start with the local front.
Again, we're forecast to see yet another cases drop in the number of infections today. From midnight to 9 p.m. Thursday, South Korea reported around 271,000 cases. This is about 41,000 cases fewer than a day ago and around 121,000 cases less than 2 weeks ago when the Omicron hit its Omicron peak. So cases for today may be under the 300,000 mark. South Korea has confirmed a total of 13 million cases since the outbreak of the pandemic, and this means that 1 in 4 people in the country have been or are infected after just 800 days. Things are not looking as positive for severe cases, as more than 1,000 patients have been in critical condition for almost a month.
And on these revised social distancing measures that we're set to hear about later today, we are hearing word that there are only going to be slight tweaks here and there.
Right, Mark. The Pandemic Recovery Committee met yesterday afternoon to finalize updates for what could possibly be the country's final round of social distancing measures. Authorities seem set to expand social gatherings caps to 10 people from the current 8, and also extending business hours by an hour to midnight. The extended hours will apply to venues like restaurants, cafes, singing rooms, bars, as well as indoor sports facilities. And the new measures are set to be implemented starting next Monday and will last for 2 weeks. There have been talks on completely abolishing business hour restrictions, but this option does not seem likely, as the KDCA chief said that the decline in cases may be slowed down by stealth Omicron, possibly leading to a resurgence in severe case figures. But pundits cautiously say this could be the last round of social distancing measures for the country, given the downward trajectory of the Omicron wave.
Now, Min-jung, also beginning today, fully vaccinated people, inbound travelers to Korea, the restrictions have been completely lifted. Tell us more of that.
That's right, Mo-gyan. Starting today, all fully vaccinated travelers arriving in South Korea will no longer have to quarantine. And this means no matter where you are coming from, you will not have to isolate for 7 days. And the same rules had been in place from mid-March, except for those arriving from Myanmar, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, or Pakistan. And from April, authorities had initially put Myanmar, Ukraine, and Vietnam on the list of quarantine countries, but authorities have decided to get rid of it altogether. So everyone who is fully vaccinated can enter the country regardless of where they came from. Being fully vaccinated means that 14 days must have passed since the final vaccine shot, but not more than 180 days. Those who have gotten booster shots are also recognized as being fully vaccinated.
Now, you mentioned before that about a quarter of South Korea's population has now had COVID-19, at least one of the strains. As a result of this, there are a growing number of people who are complaining of long-term effects of COVID-19, this long COVID as they call it. As a result of that, the authorities here are launching research to look into the possible implications of this long COVID.
Right, Mark. With 1 in 5 infected people experiencing long COVID, officials on Thursday announced they will launch an investigation into the long-term effects of COVID-19. Let's take a listen.
There is not enough research on the long-term effects of COVID-19 worldwide. there is a limit to treating patients or managing the virus situation with the existing studies. This is why we need more standardized and accurate data on lingering post-COVID-19 symptoms to tackle the pandemic more effectively.
From current studies conducted by local health research institutes and medical facilities, 20 to 79% of patients experienced fatigue, shortness of breath, sleep, and mood disorders after recovering from COVID-19. Around 19% have visited a medical facility for these reasons. However, current studies are only based on those who were severely ill, hospitalized, or had underlying health conditions. So to create more reliable data, authorities will be conducting studies on post-COVID symptoms on 1,000 patients, including younger and healthy people, and provide an in-depth analysis in the latter half of the year.
All right, Minjang, thank you so much for your report. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Moving on to other news now, labeling it as a moment of patriotism. US President Joe Biden has ordered an unprecedented release of America's emergency oil reserves in a last-ditch attempt to try and bring down fuel costs in the United States.
Regarding the war in Ukraine, Biden said President Putin appears to be, quote, self-isolated, and there are indications he may have fired some of his aides due to what Putin perceived as bad military advice. Kim Hyo-sun tells us more. The White House has announced the largest release of the U.S. emergency oil reserve, calling on oil companies to pump more to bring down gas prices that have skyrocketed even more following Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Today, I'm authorizing the release of 1 million barrels per day for the next 6 months, over 180 million barrels for the from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. This is a wartime bridge to increase oil supply until production ramps up later this year. And it is by far the largest release of our national reserve in our history.
The 180 million barrel release is equivalent to about 2 days of global demand. It will more than cover oil exports to the U.S. from Russia, which President Biden had earlier banned. Following Biden's announcement, the price of the U.S. benchmark West Texas Intermediate slid more than 7% a barrel, while the Brent crude fell some 5.4%. He also called on Congress to make companies pay a fee if they choose not to utilize oil wells on land they've leased from the government. In addition, he also urged lawmakers to pass his plan to move the country toward clean energy policies. Regarding Russia, Biden said President Putin appears to be, quote, self-isolated, and there are indications that suggest he may have fired or put under house arrest some of his advisors as a result of Moscow's war with Ukraine. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News. Russian President Vladimir Putin says his country will halt its gas exports to European buyers unless they make payment in rubles. However, the demands were swiftly rejected. Germany, France, and several other countries insist they'll continue to pay in dollars or euros. Now, in Ukraine, operations are underway to evacuate tens of thousands of people still trapped in a besieged city. Kim Sang-min reports.
Amid tough economic sanctions put in place by the international community, Russian President Vladimir Putin is seeking to leverage the country's natural gas exports. Putin signed a decree on Thursday requiring, quote, unfriendly countries to pay for natural gas in rubles via Russian banks from April 1st. He added during his televised speech that existing contracts would be terminated if clients failed to comply with their obligations. Despite strong messages coming from Europe's biggest gas provider, Western companies and governments have rejected the move, saying it's a breach of contracts which are set in euros or dollars. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said he expects his country to be able to pay for Russian gas according to prior agreements, a reaction echoed by other countries like France, Britain, and the Czech Republic. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, fresh efforts are being put in place to evacuate civilians still trapped in the besieged city of Mariupol. Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk said a convoy of 45 buses is headed to the city as Russia agreed to open a humanitarian corridor to Mariupol, where tens of thousands of civilians are still trapped. The operation is facing difficulties, however, as Vereshchuk added Russian troops blocked the convoy at a checkpoint. The operation was originally slated for Thursday, but is now going ahead on Friday due to logistical and security reasons. This comes as Russia is reportedly reinforcing its offensive in the Donbas region just a few days after saying it would radically scale down attacks on some parts of Ukraine. The Pentagon said Russia seemingly intends to refit and resupply its troops to redeploy them elsewhere. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg said Russia continues to maintain pressure on Kyiv and other cities. He added that additional offensive action is expected, which could bring even more suffering. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
President-elect Yoon and the head of the EU Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, have agreed to hold a Korea-EU summit in South Korea as early as this year. Speaking over the phone on Thursday, they also discussed sanctions against Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. Yoon said Russia's invasion can never be justified and called for international cooperation so the Ukrainian people can resume a peaceful life. They both appreciated the concerted international response against North Korea's recent ICBM test, including the EU issuing a statement condemning the regime. They added the North's nuclear issue is a serious threat and agreed to continue to cooperate on the matter. They also vowed to cooperate in the health, environment and digital sectors. Top military officers from South Korea and the US met in Hawaii on Thursday to sign a document that's expected to lead to an updated war plan in the event of a conflict with North Korea. They also agreed in principle on procedures to counter the regime's increasing nuclear threats. Bae-Eun-ji with the details.
Senior military leaders from South Korea and the US have signed the Strategic Planning Directive, or SPD, moving one step closer to updating their war plan to counter new threats. It was signed in a bilateral meeting in Hawaii on Wednesday local time by the chairman of South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Won In-cheol, and his American counterpart, General Mark Milley. The SPD signed on Wednesday was developed as a follow-up to the new Strategic Planning Guidance, or SPG, that the Allies approved last December, when they agreed to update their war plans to counter North Korea's increasing nuclear threats. The earlier guidance sets the tone for the updated war plan and led to Wednesday's signing of the Strategic Planning Directive. With the SPD in place, some experts now think the new war plan could be ready within 1 or 2 years. The existing war plan was created based on guidelines set in 2010, so it's likely that the new plan will be updated to reflect changes in the North Korea's military capabilities. Also on Wednesday in Hawaii, the two generals held talks with their Japanese counterpart, General Koji Yamazaki. The three countries reaffirmed their close cooperation aimed at achieving regional security. They also exchanged views on multilateral cooperation and training in order to enhance peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. Trilateral meetings like this one are normally held once or twice a year, the last one almost a year ago last April. Bae-Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. It is Friday, so we're going to take a look at a lighter topic with the weekend just around the corner, but still an issue of importance to people here. South Korea is seeking to have hanji, or the nation's traditional paper making, included on UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage list. Some local experts are deeply concerned hanji could be in danger of dying out unless it's recognized by the global agency. Hanji has been made the same way for centuries now, and it really is a skill that has been passed down from generation to generation, is commonly referred to as 100 paper, as that is the number of stages required by hand to make each piece.
Now, given how complex it is to learn and then perfect, it can often take people years, even decades, to master the technique. In recent years, its decline has also been marked, hence the push to give it more prestige and to better maintain the tradition by having it listed by UNESCO. For more, we connect to Dr. Lee Oh-kyu from the National Institute of Forest Science in Seoul. Good morning, Dr. Lee.
Good morning, everybody.
Thank you for joining us. So firstly, Other East Asian countries like China and Japan are also well known for their ancient use of paper. But what makes hanji stand out from paper made from those countries?
Yeah, all paper from Korea, China, and Japan, especially manufactured in traditional manner, has its own specialties in a certain criteria. Major differences of papers between Korea, China, and Japan are source materials and the way of manufacturing. Under this situation, Korean traditional paper hanji received international attention, especially in European countries, recent years. In case of Italy, they reported that one of the Leonardo da Vinci's works and many important cultural heritage made of paper have been restored using hanji. Then what makes hanji so special? Then hanji's extraordinary property from the others is its tenacity. It is very strong and very flexible at the same time. Also, it is barely torn apart unless it gets wet. These specialties are due to the source material is a bark of daknamu, which is a cousin of tree paper mulberry, and due to a unique paper forming process called 흘림뜨기, which is Korea invented. In this Korean invented process, multi-layers of fibers from the bark of daknamu sit on a sheet of hanji within crossly laminated manner. So far, Korea has 16 items on the list of UNESCO's Memory of the World, and it is ranked 4th place in the world and the 1st place in Asia. 10 items out of the 16 are made of hanji, and this makes hanji more special.
Okay, now you did go into a little bit of detail about the process of how hanji is produced. We mentioned before we introduced you how it is an incredibly complex process, but if for our visitors overseas, just explain the steps that are required to make it.
Okay, I'll try to make it easier. To make hanji, of course, daknamu has to be harvested. I mentioned the daknamu is the source material. Then 1 or 2 years old shoots are cut during the winter time. The harvested shoots are steamed to make debarking easier. And debarking, after the debarking, the outer skin is scraped using a knife called dakkar in Korean. And the remaining whitish inner bark is called baekpi in Korean. Then the baekpi is cooked in a lye solution for softening. The lye is made from the ash of agricultural byproducts like beanstalks. The cooked baekpi is washed in a clean water and bleached in sunlight and is beaten with a wooden bat till it becomes pounded fibers. For formation of paper sheet, the fibers are put in a large vat containing a mixture of water and plant mucilage and mix them well. Finally, using a combination of mold and mold cover. In Korean, those are bartel and bar. And the combination, using that combination, scoop the mixture several times from the vat, and the resulting thin multi-layered fibers become a sheet of hanji when it dries.
Wow, that's a lot of complex procedures to make hanji.
Yep.
Just recognize it now. But now on the move to get hanji included on the UNESCO World Intangible Cultural Heritage List, what does the listing process involve?
Well, there may be multiple steps for inclusion on the intangible cultural heritage of humanity list. The most important step is preparation of appropriate representative list of ICH of humanity. When it is ready, Korean government hand that into the Committee of ICH Humanity, and then the committee evaluate and make a decision.
And finally then, so the move to list hanji on UNESCO's list is nothing new. Korea has really been pushing hard for this for years now. And everything you've mentioned makes it sound like it really ticks all the boxes required to be included on the list. So why is it taking so long?
Yeah, I heard that hanji has to be included on the UNESCO's ICH humanity for over a decade. There could be some difficulties in the process, but fortunately, last year a corporation was established to support hanji being listed in ICH of humanity. The leader of corporation is Lee Bae-yong, who already led soars, which is a Korean Neo-Confucian Academy, to be one of UNESCO's World Heritage in 2019. The corporation drives active movements. It already organized 4 academic conferences in 11 years, and more comes. So they said they will help hanji being listed in 2026. I also am crossing my fingers for that. So far, there may be some obstacles, but in the future, I think it's very bright.
Well, let's all hope to see hanji on the list. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
South Korea's President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol met Thursday with young exporters and pledged to provide them with active support. The incoming leader also stressed the need for financial and tax systems to help South Korean businesses more broadly. Yoon Jung-min with the details.
Meeting young people working in the trade industry, President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol pledged active support for them, not just for what he termed hardware, but also for software, meaning the digitalization of logistics. At the request of the group's chairman, he met on Thursday with some 200 young people at the Korea International Trade Association, including college students taking part in the so-called Global Trade Expert Incubating Program.
저희 윤석열 정부는 일자리를 만들어내는 기업과 경제 성장의 정부, 그리고 청년에게 충분한 또 무한한 기회를 제공하는 정부가 될 수 있도록 저도 최선을 다하겠습니다.
Earlier in the day, Yoon was debriefed by the economy divisions of his transition committee. According to a readout by his spokesperson Kim Eun-hye, Yoon stressed the need for financial and tax support for businesses. He said South Korea had invested in the past about 5% of its GDP for research and development, but that spending lacked focus. The president-elect called for his team to think more about how research funds should be spent rather than how much should be spent. He also asked them to find ways to discover and help globally competitive startups and small and medium-sized companies. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Now, Yoon's transition committee is calling on the outgoing Moon administration to immediately devise measures to ease real estate transaction taxes for people with more than one property, with the aim of increasing the housing supply. There have also been calls for fuel tax cuts to be extended due to rising prices at the pump. Lee Young-eun with this report.
President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol has hinted at a major shift in housing policy, mainly an easing of real estate taxes. And to get things started, his transition committee is pushing for a temporary lifting of the heavy real estate transaction taxes for those who own more than one property.
We will work for the measure to be in place for 1 year starting April. This is to preemptively respond to a tax hike that multiple homeowners will face due to a recent rise in housing prices.
The committee has officially requested that the current government takes action immediately so that the implementation comes before June 1st, when property holding taxes are calculated. That's to incentivize homeowners to sell their extra properties before then by easing their tax burdens, which will ultimately facilitate sales in the market. The committee says if the current government does not make the enforcement, President Yoon will be making the decree as soon as he takes office on May 10th. In line with revising housing policies, President Yoon has also called on the committee to ease mortgage regulations, in particular for first-time buyers, increasing the LTV or loan-to-home value ratio. The committee has also requested the government increases the fuel tax cut from the current 20% to 30%, also starting in April. Meanwhile, as for compensating small businesses hit by COVID-19, the committee has made clear its willingness to push for an extra budget bill, but this will need to wait after Yoon takes office.
The Transition Committee will be fully in charge of planning the extra budget. Then the budget bill will be submitted by the Yoon Suk-yeol administration once it is launched.
Earlier in the day, President Yoon said this will be some $40 billion, repeating his previous extra budget plan. But the committee says the scale and how to procure the money have not been finalized. 이경은, Arirang News.
The core personal consumption price index, the Federal Reserve's favored inflation gauge, soared 6.5% on year in February, according to the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis. It's the fastest increase in the United States since January of 1982. Excluding volatile food and energy prices, the index jumped 5.4% in February. Analysts say inflation is likely to persist due to surging energy prices in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. They say this could lead to bigger and faster rate hikes by the Fed.
Welcome to Dialogue this week. In this corner, we invite guests from in and out of Korea to talk about a wide variety of issues ranging from culture and sports to the latest trends around the world. Now, raising pets has now become very common in South Korea. In fact, the estimated number of people who live with pets has reached a whopping 15 million, which is a quarter of the nation's population. Due to this, pet-related industries are booming, ranging from fashion to education and even funerals. But even with a rise in the number of pet owners, there still seems to be some underlying problems that need to be addressed. So, why are more people raising pets in Korea? And what is the environment like for raising pets in the country? And what can we do to enhance the lives of these animal companions? For this, we're joined by Kang Eun, a veterinarian at Itaewon Animal Hospital, and Kim Hae-rin, manager of international affairs and PR team at the Korea Kennel Federation, both via Skype. Welcome to you both to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us. So first, Dr. Kang, let's start with the reason. For starters, why are we seeing such a rise in the number of people living with pets in Korea?
I think more people, especially young people, start raising dogs. I think it's highly related to the low birth rate in Korea. Like young married couples start to adopt dogs instead of having a baby. And also, like COVID-19 is also contributed like increasing number of pet owners as well, because like I found many parents start adopting a dog or a cat for their children who stays longer time indoors.
So then why do you think more and more people are looking to pets as companions, and what preparations do you think a potential dog owner needs to make? You know, for instance, in Germany, if someone wants to own a dog, they need a dog handler certificate. Why do they have such a requirement, and what are your thoughts on such regulations?
Well, adopting a dog or a cat is like signing a 15-year contract. So adopting them only because they are cute or adorable is not enough. It requires much, much higher responsibility. So in money-wise, they will spend a lot of money as they get older, and you might need to spend plenty of time only for the dog. So I hope the potential dog owners take those things into considerations before they adopt a new family. And and I totally agree with the regulations like about adopting a dog. Like I'm in Korea now, like people can adopt a new dog through the like pet markets and or pet shops. So any people can adopt a dog. So there is no any regulations about adopting a dog. So in Korea, I totally agree with like establish some regulations on those adopting dogs.
So we need some kind of more regulations to highlight the responsibility of raising these pets. Now let's bring Ms. Kim Hae-rin into the conversation. The requirement of leashes and muzzles in public places continue to be a topic of debate, especially for dog owners. Now in February, there was a revision to the Animal Protection Act, which now requires dogs to remain within 2 meters of its owner. So what are your thoughts on this requirement? Do you think it will be effective?
We understand that Korean government introduced those requirements for negligent dog owners as a series of fatal dog bites have sparked the call for better control of potential dangerous dogs in recent years. Those requirements could help owners control their dogs in order to prevent possible accidents as a temporary solution. However, tougher regulation may not be the fundamental solution in long term. What we need more is education program for dogs and their owners together. So for example, American Kennel Club runs a Canine Good Citizen program, which is called CGC, which is a 10-skill training program that open to all the dogs and focus on training the basics of good manners and obedience, instilling the value of responsible ownership, and strengthening bonds between owners and their dogs at home and out in the community. So dogs who finish this program, they are more likely welcomed by their community. We really need a program like this. So we believe that good dogs and owners can good owners. All it takes is a little bit of a training.
These trainings would definitely help in, reducing biting accidents. But as I've mentioned, with the increase in the number of dog owners across the country, there have consequently been many reports of biting incidents. What are the concerns surrounding such biting accidents, and where does biting people or dogs biting people or dogs bite other dogs, Dr. Kang?
Well, biting wounds can cause severe and fatal infections both in humans and dogs. So it should be considered a serious issue. Like if you or your dog is bitten by a dog or any random dog, please see a doctor or veterinarian before it gets any severe. Also, in Korea is not rabies-free country. Like biting accidents can be a potential cause for spreading out of rabies infection. So please make sure your dog is up to date for any rabies shots every year.
Now, speaking of accidents, Dr. Kang, one of the financial factors to consider when living with pets is vet costs. So can you tell us about the pet insurance situation in South Korea? How far along has it come, and where do you see it needing to go?
There are several pet insurance products already available and developed by a big insurance companies for humans. And the number of products is definitely increasing recently, but still I found most of my clients are not really having those pet insurance yet. And I feel like they are kind of skeptical about having pet insurance for their dogs or cats. And I think the main reason is that, and I don't know why, and so many products do not include they do not cover for the like expenses for like preventive like medical costs like vaccines. So I hopefully in the future like those products covers for those prices as well, because as a veterinarian I feel like prevention is the most important thing.
I can totally relate to that as a pet owner myself. Now, Hae-rin, President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol has 7 companion animals, 4 dogs and 3 cats. And during the 20th presidential election campaign, Yoon said that he would work to eradicate the so-called dog factories or dog farms in South Korea. What are your thoughts on this? And how would the closure of dog farms affect the supply cycle of dogs as well?
So we don't want to deny and hide the reality, but we are really working hard to close all the dog farms by providing campaign and education programs to dog-related profession and public. And dog farms must be closed to ensure dogs' welfare and health. So I also want to introduce the dog breeding program and professional breeders. And many other countries have laws that people only able to adopt their dogs from the registered breeders. Those breeders working very hard as a professional breeder for their dog welfare and health, and they make sure become a very good counselor to the new owners.
Right. But, on a lighter note, I want to ask a rather personal question, Hae-rin. As I told you, I'm a dog owner myself. My family and I raise my dog in a Korean language environment, and sometimes I don't think my dog understands when I speak in English. So is there such a thing as, bilingual or multilingual dogs? And also, what do dogs experience when we take them on overseas trips?
An interesting study was performed by the researchers in Hungary. The researchers compared the MRI scans from reading in 2 different languages. The researchers found different activity patterns in 2 areas of the brain that have been associated in both humans and dogs with deciphering the meaning of speech. They have a very unique understanding of certain aspects of human speech, with the body language and even facial experience. My dog, actually, he took the puppy class in Canada, and he moved back to Korea and learned comments in Korean too. Now he clearly understands comments in both languages. We can try to train our dogs to understand the different languages, such as using foreign languages dog comments.
Wow, that is something very new. I should try to train my dog more this time. Now, but with, increasing numbers of pet dogs in South Korea, there are more puppy kindergartens and other such training centers related to that. The Korean Kennel Federation provides various behavior training education programs, as you touched upon a while ago. Can you elaborate what kind of programs you offer and why is education for both owners and dog is so important?
Korean Kennel Federation is a member of a Federation Psychologists International. We share our education program with the 98 countries in all around the world. So KKF, we have a designated academies which is providing education on grooming and training and so on. Those programs are for professional trainers, and now many qualified trainers from KKF are working actively in Korea. Korea Kennel Federation recently developed the NCS-based education program on dog behavior training. It will allow many Koreans to access the education program easily. Learning from our program, owners can train their dogs by themselves. As I mentioned before, it is really important to provide the proper education to dogs and owners.
Moving on to our final question. Hae-rin, pet dogs are treated like family more so than other pets. Now, what is the pet dog funeral industry like in South Korea? Is it quite different from other services that are offered in other countries?
So as we have developed the pet industry right now, so many pet owners care about the funeral and funerals, their dog's funeral very much. But in South Korea, it is illegal to bury animals park cases in other people's private property or parks. So it is really important to find the authorized animal burial and cremation facilities. Those days, there are many pet funeral service companies which offers the funeral cremation, different ways to keep the ash and so on. So it is necessary to find the proper place and use their services. There are many, so we can easily find it nowadays.
Right, that's good to hear. But I'm afraid we will have to wrap up our discussion at this point. Thank you so much for making time for us, Hae-rin and Dr. Kang. It was a very informative discussion. I hope both of you have a great weekend.
Thank you very much.
South Korea is re-implementing its ban on the in-store use of single-use products at food service businesses. Customers dining in at restaurants, cafes, food stalls and bars will not be allowed to use single-use products such as plastic cups or wooden chopsticks. Such products will only be available for takeout or delivery. The ban was put on ice for 2 years to prevent the spread of COVID-19, but the Environment Ministry has reimposed it in a bid to regulate the soaring amount of plastic waste. However, the ministry added businesses will be exempt from fines until the virus crisis dies down a touch. Late South Korean artist Namjoon is known and celebrated around the world as a pioneer of video art. But how much do we know about the man? Celebrating the 90th anniversary of what would have been the artist's birth, the Namjoon Art Center takes people on a journey into his life and philosophy. Kim Bok-young went to check it out and filed this report.
The musician John Lennon called this man avant-garde. Known as the pioneer of video art, Namjoon was an artist who always chose a much longer journey away from familiarity and hypocrisy. Celebrating the 90th anniversary of Paek's birth, Namjoon Art Center has come up with 2 special exhibitions. Archaeology of Avant-Garde shows Paek's works along with 10 photographs featuring the scenes from Paek's life, traveling back from 2000 to 1964. Paek originally dreamed of being a classical composer and was heavily influenced by Arnold Schoenberg, who was then seen as the ultimate avant-garde. Yet he also wanted to find his own artistic path. Paek is remembered as an artist who always experimented and studied new mediums and art using videos, satellites, televisions, and even lasers. That is why we label him avant-garde. Rehabilitation of Genghis Khan, which won the grand prize at the Venice Biennale 1993, shows visitors how Paek saw himself as a nomad like the Mongolians. And visitors can see how much Paek also sought to make radical changes in music by having artists play violins that had been pulled out of the water.
Why can there be a video synthesizer? That is the question that popped up in Paek's head. Just like a DJ mixing sounds, the Paek Abe video synthesizer modulates colors and presents shuffled images filmed by cameras.
Another exhibition is a rendition of Paek's music score to the Symphony for 20 Rooms. Paek composed this score in 1961, but it could not be performed while he was alive. Rather than notes or scales, the score depicts 16 rooms with several instructions on a paper. He assigned various sounds, objects, and devices for each square, and with the help of 7 contemporary artists, each square has been unfolded as a viewable score.
Based on Paek's instructions written on the text score, each room displays music stimulating not only the eyes and ears, but also the sense of smell.
As visitors make their own sounds using devices, the overall sound continuously changes depending on who turns the pages of the score and how they operate the devices. The curator says perhaps that is the reason why there were only 16 squares on the paper instead of the 20 rooms mentioned in the title, leaving the rest of the symphony to be completed by its audience. Kim Bok-young, Arirang News.
And now for a look at news from around the world, we turn to Lee Seung-jae standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning, Seung-jae.
Good morning to you guys.
Good morning. The United Nations has appealed to the international community for assistance for the people of Afghanistan. They've been having a rough time over the past 12 months, of course. Now, a lot of money was pledged by donors from around the world, but it still fell short of what the UN had been asking for.
That's right, Mark. So during a high-level pledging conference on Thursday, the UN had called for $4.4 billion for humanitarian aid in Afghanistan. However, donor countries pledged just over $2.4 billion. Now, some of the donors included the United States, the EU, and the UK, who had strongly criticized the Taliban's decision to deny secondary education for girls. Now, earlier in the day, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres had called for donors to provide unconditional funding, adding that 9 million Afghans face famine, with families resorting to selling children and organs to survive. Now, the humanitarian situation worsened significantly following the Taliban's return to power last August, with the economy in Afghanistan on the brink of a complete collapse. Now, a massive fire in southern Chile has burned up to 80 hectares of land while destroying at least 40 homes late Wednesday. Locals from the town of Laguna Verde were seen alongside firefighters trying to put out the fire as authorities worked to prevent the fire from advancing towards residential areas. Some pockets of the fire were still active Thursday as strong winds and steep ravines made it difficult to control the blaze. Now, Valparaiso in 2014 saw one of the worst fires in the country's history, with over 800 hectares burned, 2,500 buildings destroyed, and the lives of 15 people lost. Now, Blue Origin's New Shepard spacecraft completed its fourth flight with a crew on Thursday, returning successfully to the West Texas after taking half a dozen passengers for a 10-minute suborbital joyride. Now, the flight came 2 days later than scheduled as poor weather conditions forced the mission to be postponed earlier this week. While Saturday Night Live star Pete Davidson was supposed to be one of the passengers on board the latest flight, he dropped out earlier this month and was replaced by Gary Lai, the architect behind New Shepard's reusable launch system. And finally, NASA scientists have discovered the most distant star ever recorded and have named it Earendel, as an Old English word meaning morning star. Using the Hubble Space Telescope, researchers described the star as being blue in color and estimated to be 50 to 100 times the mass of our Sun, while being millions of times brighter. Its light traveled for 12.9 billion years before reaching Earth, meaning that the star existed when the universe was just 7% of its current known age. Now, until now, the most distant star on record was Icarus, which is known to have existed 4 billion years after Earendel.
Good morning. Breezy, chilly, but bright start to April across Korea. Morning temperatures in the capital are about 3 degrees lower than yesterday morning, while inland regions are having sub-zero temperatures. Highs will be slightly lower today, leading to wide gaps in ratings between lows and highs. It's going to be mainly sunny for the first half of the day, then southern provinces will notice more clouds moving in later, with light rain in the forecast in Jeollado provinces and parts of the East Coast. Morning temperatures are 3 to 8 degrees lower than the same time yesterday. Chuncheon slightly above 1 degree. Highs will be similar to slightly higher this afternoon, Jeju going up to 14 degrees with cherry blossoms in full bloom on the island. And the capital region will start to see the first blooms this weekend. And finally, we'll have a calm and bright weekend. No dramatic weather conditions. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
And that's all we have for now. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. New Day at Arirang will be back at 8 a.m. Korea time on Monday.
Yes, we certainly will. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for joining us. Hope you have a great weekend and we'll see you next week. Until then, goodbye.